London to get here, and they were completely packed out as the protesters moved down, so certainly tens of thousands, possibly above that. It's a pretty relaxed atmosphere, a lot of people having fun. Let's chat to three Londoners who've come in. I've spoken to people who've come in from North Wales and Brighton and places like that. Sarah Jane, Olavide and Andy. Sarah Jane, you're actually born in New York, you're British, dual citizenship, British and American. What do you make? What's brought you particularly here? What is it about Donald Trump that really has brought you to the protest?
Well, I don't mean it's not about Donald Trump, it's about the morals, the policies and the misogyny, the racism that he represents. I don't even want to give him the respect of it being about him. I've come to say that we don't believe in any of these things, racism, misogyny, separating.
And for Theresa May to take time to hopefully discuss that trade deal that she's hoping for going forward. But this pomp, this pageantry, I think was probably something that maybe I didn't anticipate it would be at this level. We've always been talking about how this is a working visit. This is not the full state visit, but we have certainly pulled out the bells and the whistles to make sure that the president goes home happy and gets those images that he wants to portray himself as a truly international statesman.
About 45 minutes, something like that, before they go their separate ways?
I don't think anyone's got any timer on this. The Queen will take her time and she will make sure the tea is delicious.
I'm sure she will. I'm sure she will. Final question before we let you go. Is it cream or jam first?
Well, I don't know whether they'll have scones. Too dangerous. You've got to leave the politics alone, Rebecca.
Okay, it's good to talk to both of you. Thanks very much indeed. More on the visit by President Trump to have tea with the Queen very shortly indeed, but I just want to bring you some breaking news from Salisbury. Remember that Novichok case? Sadly, one of those people that was infected last week, actually 30th of June, wasn't it, has sadly died. Well, the latest that we're hearing is that the police in Salisbury have traced the source of that Novichok, and they believe it to be a small bottle that was found in the home of Charlie Rowley, one of the two people that was infected. You remember he was critically ill, but has since made a relatively good recovery. He is sitting up in bed and undoubtedly has had the opportunity to speak to the police. As a result, they have been guided to his home in Amesbury, and they found a small bottle which the police believe is the source, the secondary source of Novichok. We'll get more information on that and update you as soon as we possibly can. Meantime, continuing with our coverage here in Windsor, and the President is here. There's been a huge demonstration in London, 100,000 plus, a smaller demonstration here. One wonders what impact, if any, that might have on Her Majesty.
I would say none at all. She's been there, she's done it before, hasn't she? She has invited so many controversial and colourful characters into her home, and of course she doesn't sit there with a book of heads of state going, oh, who do I fancy inviting? It's always at the behest of her government, and Theresa May on this occasion has said, yep, I think that you should invite Donald Trump into your home. He is, of course, very keen on his history, and no doubt if he has any time with the Queen to mention this, he will want to talk about the past presidents that she's met. And I think for all of them across the years, there has been this one constant theme. They have all seemed awestruck. They are used to being the big man in the room. And when it comes to the Queen, they realise that she is a woman without parallel when it comes to the heads of state, the religious leaders that she's met across the years, and the experience that she has. And that will be an incredible moment for him, and I think he will reflect on the fact that the likes of George W. Bush, the likes of the Obamas, the Reagans have all been there and had that moment.
Yeah, I mean, how lovely. He's very used to telling us that he has a golf course in Turnberry, and Her Majesty, I'm sure, could reply, how lovely, I have a castle.
Yes.
Why? She also has one in central London. Why did he not go to Buckingham Palace?
Well, I think that, again, this was advice from the Prime Minister, and the Queen operates most effectively in her constitutional role on the advice of the government of the day. That's what they're there for. And the Queen has done, I think, pretty much what she was asked to do, and that is to welcome the President as head of state. And there isn't actually a more charming or easy way in which to do this, and it's worked really well.
Okay. About 45 minutes, something like that, we think they'll be chatting for, and we will come back to you in just a moment or two. Thank you. One or two problems with my auto cue just at the moment. I think what happens is that when the president comes along, all the comms that we have get jammed a little bit. So I can tell you that Tom Rogan from the Washington Examiner is in our central London studio, and he's joining us now. Hello to you, Tom. You saw all of what happened, didn't you? What did you make of it?
Well, I think the underpinning there of the special relationship as rendered by the British Army, by the Foot Guards regiment that was there, is ultimately why this relationship, even with President Trump's unpredictability, will sustain. And I think the example of the Queen smiling at the president, they get through it. These might not be two people necessarily terribly predisposed to getting along, but the systemic nature of the special relationship in terms of security alignment, I think, is the sustaining element that will be seen as why, on both sides of the Atlantic, as to why this trip, for its unpredictability, was still a success.
Tom, we've been hearing from Rhiannon, who is, as you know, our royal correspondent, and she was making the point that any US president, of which she's met 12 now, is used to being the big man in the room, not so much when Her Majesty is in town.
Well, that's true. I mean, I think the sense of history and form and formality of the Queen is always something that American politicians are impressed by, because it does carry a sense of class that is unique to Great Britain. And I think in part that's why the British government was so keen that the president get to meet the Queen, because for someone like the president, who does take very personally the pageantry that is provided to him as president, there's no better way to do that than the Queen. I mean, to put it in perhaps more simple terms, or simpler terms, this is a better example of what President Macron did with President Trump last year at the Bastille Day parade in Paris. And I suspect we will see
that US trade deal that would kill it off. He also, I thought, just put a few caveats in. He suggested, for example, that if we're going to get that trade deal, we will have to be independent. There will have to be no restrictions. And he again went on the offensive against the EU, who he accused of giving the US a rotten deal. And I take it from all that he still has doubts about whether it will be possible to do a deal if we are still fairly closely intertwined with the EU, because he clearly has a great deal of animosity, it seems, towards the EU.
Tax in the United States. This case is just about one particular effort that was made during the 2016 election. The efforts of our department, of the Department of Homeland Security, of other federal agencies, and of all of the state election boards throughout the country are ongoing. And those efforts preceded
deference, the sense of being given recognition of his office. And so to be able to meet the Queen in this way, I think the White House will be very happy about it. The president will be very happy about it. And again, the president is well aware of the media reporting surrounding this visit. So anything that can sort of consolidate him in his own mind and the White House to say, well, look, the British government is very keen to build a closer relationship with me personally, I think is constructive from the British point of view. And you've already seen in the press conference with Prime Minister May earlier today, the president backtracking in a way that is very unusual for this president from his comments to the Sun last night. And again, that is striking. You wouldn't see that, I think, with many other nations or leaders. And it does reflect that the president and everyone around him, at least everyone around him, are telling him, in the White House team, you have got to, this relationship matters for X, Y, and Z.
There must be a certain level of nervousness, though. You touch on the fact that the president had to backtrack a little bit in that news conference today about what he did or didn't say about Theresa May. There must be a certain level of nervousness. If you meet with Her Majesty, it's expected to be kept confidential. It's not in his DNA.
Well, yes, I mean, I think that is true, but I, as your guest, your correspondent had noted, that the Queen will be, I think, very careful in terms of what she says to avoid just that scenario. She will be briefed on that. But the White House will also have told the president how important that is. I think they will have told him, treat this as a, high-level intelligence briefing, that something really would be incredibly counterproductive if you release. Now, the president has a penchant, of course, for sometimes ignoring those directives and taking glee in that. In this case, however, I think you see that the how he was interacting with the Queen there, he clearly understands the importance of the symbolism as it appears. And I think, the tweets that come out, I think they will come out, but they will be very broad in terms of what a great honour to meet Her Majesty the Queen, etc., rather than any specifics. The Queen told me I'm the greatest president ever.
Yeah, he does look suitably deferential as we're looking at him in these images. Will this be enough, do you think, for the president? He had wanted a state visit. He had been promised a state visit. This is not a state visit. It's a working visit. Do you think he'll expect another bite at the cherry?
Perhaps, but I think this, if we look at where we were yesterday evening in terms of that Breaking Sun report and where we are now, I think the British government and the White House will be extremely happy. The president had a very good time at the display at Sandhurst with the SAS and US Special Operations Forces. The